Well, the thing that strikes me about it is, and I've always thought this, you mentioned gangs, it's so much harder, like the amount of work you have to do to organize a gang. And then, I suppose you're going to have killings, like whether it's the mafia or whatever. It would be a lot easier to just start a company and make an honest product.
Yeah, it ends up being as much work, right?
Yeah. Why don't you just do something that's legal instead of doing all of this work? Yeah. Why don't you just start a corporation that's legal and make a product everybody
it's like,
wants?
Especially with the mafia, they definitely have businesses that are just fronts.
Yeah,
like,
they
what
do.
If you just started running those honestly?
Welcome to Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. I'm Timothy.
And I'm Caleb.
And you're listening to Bible Discussions, the forum where we explore biblical topics that are relevant to your life. Today we are continuing our series on the 30 sayings of the wise from the book of Proverbs. And in this episode, we're covering saying number 23. And so let's go ahead and read that. It's in Proverbs 24, verses 8 through 9.
Whoever plots evil will be known as a schemer. The schemes of folly are sin, and people detest a mocker.
So here's like three ideas that seem kind of thrown together.
Yeah, and I think some of it follows. Like plotting evil leads to a reputation as a schemer. That makes sense. That's what you're doing. Folly leads to sin. That makes sense. But how does it lead to being a mocker? That one, it does feel to me like it's just kind of tossed in there.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is there's two ways you can look at it. You can look at it as, well, do people detest being mocked when they're scheming sin and being told? We know that people hate it when you tell them the thing you're doing is wrong. Mm-hmm. Like our culture's chock full of that right now. It's like people saying, no, that's immoral. And people are like, you can't tell me that's immoral. And then the other side of it is the immoral people mocking the good people.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we'll be able to look at both sides of the coin when we go through. But
right.
Maybe the thing is that both people hate it.
Man, everybody just hates everyone.
Immoral people hate being told that they're immoral, even if it's true. And righteous people don't like being told, that they're goody two shoes, and then we're going to kill you, because we resent that we're not as good as you.
Didn't work out too well for the young men mocking Elisha.
No, we don't even have that verse in our episode, but
that's a very specific and gruesome story.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to explore that by looking at another passage that we've covered previously.
Yeah.
In a long time ago in our Proverbs episode, I believe we read this, but Proverbs 1 verses 10 through 19, we'll try to flesh this out a little bit more. It says, "My son, if sinful men entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, 'Come along with us, let's lie in wait for innocent blood, let's ambush some harmless soul, let's swallow them alive like the grave and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. Cast lots with us. We will all share the loot. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths, for their feet rush into evil. They are swift to shed blood. How useless to spread a net where every bird can see it. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush only themselves. Such are the paths of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the life of those who get it."
Yeah, that's kind of an insult there. Like, why you can't spread a net where birds can see it. But these guys are even dumber than birds, because they're spreading a net for themselves and then they fall in it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way that the ESV puts verse 14. It says, "We will all have one purse," where like we'll share all the loot. It's like, yeah, right. It's like, come on, we're gonna lie and cheat and kill and steal, and then we're gonna share everything with you because we're so generous.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that struck me when I was reading it there was just like to ponder, like, are there really people? I mean, this is what it's talking about: scheming and planning evil. There's actually someone who sits in there. And we've seen this in recent events, right, where they find the notes and the manifestos and the, other things, writings and cartoons that people who have committed these mass murders, they actually sit in their room and they do these same things that are listed here.
Now, I mean, they're not interested in a material gain off of that. But
I'm just using that as an example.
I think you still
the person who robs a bank probably makes a map of how they're going to get in and out and all the other stuff too. So I'm just saying, like, we know that evil people do these things.
Yeah.
It's
I
weird.
mean, I think of like, I almost think of like pirates, like the classic image of a pirate, which is somewhat, embellished, but like that they have a code they live by. Like, we're going to share the loot. Now that was true. Like, everyone had a portion that they got. Mm-hmm. And if things were not distributed fairly, more killing was going to happen. But I think of that, or I think the best modern comparison would be like gangs, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's very enticing for like a young man who's lacking direction or good role models. Yeah. Sounds like, it sounds enticing. Like you're going to get, you don't have to work for a living. You're going to take advantage of other people, but you're going to have this camaraderie with your group. And
well, the thing that strikes me about it is, and I've always thought this, you mentioned gangs, it's so much harder, like the amount of work you have to do to organize a gang. Mm-hmm. And then, I suppose you're going to have killings, like whether it's the mafia or whatever. It would be a lot easier to just start a company and make an honest product.
Yeah, it ends up being as much work, right?
Yeah. Why don't you just do something that's legal instead of doing all of this work? Yeah. And then as you read in these things, like you have to convince other people to come along with you. It's like, oh, well, you come and do these things with us, and this is what'll happen. And you get the coercion that's involved, which comes out good in like movies like The Godfather. Where there's a group of people who are breaking the law and including other people in it. And then if they do a favor for you, you're expected to do a favor for them. And then it's like this whole system. It's like, why don't you just start a corporation that's legal and make a product everybody wants?
Especially with the mafia, they definitely have businesses that are just fronts.
Yeah,
what if you just started running those honestly?
Yeah, they just like, let's make it look like this place actually sells, laundry detergent, but we'll just use it to launder the money. It's like, well, okay. Yeah, so it's very strange. And I think, like that's one sense in which nobody likes a mocker. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because if you joined a group of people like that and you went in and you were like, guys, why don't we just follow the law instead? I don't think these are good ideas. They like get this stool pigeon out of here, right? He's going to narc on us all. Yeah. And so like nobody likes that. They don't like anybody who goes against the current of what the group think should be. So right. I think that's a sense in which you're a mocker if you disagree with the group think, Yeah. And so I think you had some ideas about setting your own
Oh yeah, and so here we get back to that. The schemes of folly are sin, right? Mm-hmm. It's like they're falling into their own pit, their own trap that they set for someone else. And I mean, well, it's kind of everything comes back on them. Like we said already, they're going after ill-gotten gain. They're looking for an easy way to make money, and it ends up being, as much work or 10 times as dangerous as anything else they could be doing. And everything. You end up kind of just on the run, and you start down that path, and you can't. There's no easy off ramp.
That's what I thought was the pure genius of the TV show Columbo, which growing up in my house was like my favorite show, because Columbo knows whoever did this has made this giant plan. And if you've ever seen the show, he acts like an idiot, and he's like, "Gosh, I don't understand how this happened."
He's always forgetting his pencil somewhere around here. He's asking the murderer, "Can I borrow a pen?"
He like draws them in by going, "Gosh, I just can't figure out how this could have happened." And they have a total idea of how they wanted law enforcement to think of all this stuff, and so they're like, "Well, it's simple, Columbo. It had to be just like this." And so he knows that the person who's trying to keep this pit from closing in on them, like you were talking about, that they're going to shape everything the way to keep them out.
Work hard. Like everybody else he talks to is like, I don't know, man. I need a coffee. Like, But the killer is always ready to, talk about it and lay things out clearly and work 10 times as hard to figure it out because they need him to figure it out a certain way. Yeah,
the very helpful person that says, "How can you not see that it must have been this?" He's like, "Oh, wow, that's a brilliant insight." And and then they start going, "Oh boy, this guy's eating out of my hand." And then they start giving him more. And so that's kind of like how they fall into their own pit.
Yeah.
And they can't figure out how they're sliding down into the bottom of it, And it's just because if you just let the truth play out, it's always going to expose them. It's always going to come to ruin.
He's, this is not super relevant, but he's actually based on Father Brown, which is a G.K. Chesterton character.
Okay.
He wrote mysteries where this he'd be the most unassuming person in the room. He's just a little like rural pastor who always ends up in these wacky situations,
saving the day.
Yeah, but he was an inspiration for Columbo. Yeah.
Speaking of pastors,
right. Yeah, there's a Pastor Will Whedon who does a daily Bible study called "The Word of the Lord Endures Forever." He did a study on the first passage of Proverbs, and he's where I got that idea of connecting it to modern gangs. I mean, not that it's that hard of a connection to make, but I needed a little help apparently. I certainly think the mentality there is might makes right, and kind of like, don't you want to join the winning side? We're strong. We can take advantage of the weak, and so we're going to thrive off of that. And we have the real power because we're the ones who deal out death. If we go back and look at verse 12 especially, where they say, let's swallow them alive like the grave and whole like those who go down to the pit. Like, we're so strong. We're strong as death. We're going to swallow people alive. Like, we can kill people. And that's where the true power lies, is whoever can deal out death and rule by strength. So there again, now we see the mocking going the other way, right? They're mocking the meek, the humble, the people who want to, live at peace and make an honest living. They're saying,
suckers.
well, suckers, and we're going to take advantage of them. They're mocking the people of God. So what's the Christian response to this?
Yeah, in verses like Matthew 10:28 say, do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell.
Yeah. So in other words, they're not as strong as they think they are. They're high on their own egos, and they're not like the pattern that runs through all the sayings of the wise. Right? They're not thinking long term enough. Or you have Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. We've talked a lot about that in recent episodes.
Yeah.
We had a couple where we really ended up looking at the meek outlasting the strong, because once you start killing people and trying to rule by strength, there's always a bigger fish, right?
Yeah, and the person that stands back and watches is the only one left at the end.
Yeah.
So
the takeaway there is that might does not make right, right? And so what do we do about the power of death? Because that's still kind of concerning, whether it's some goon shooting people or just your natural death. What do we do about the power of death? Paul tells us what to make of their belief in the power of death, because that's where they're ultimately, if you think about it, that's where they're putting their hope. Whoever can kill the most people or the most efficiently, that's the strongest person, and that's the person you want to align yourself with. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:54-55, death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? That's the idea, like you see in a lot of Christian art or Christian literature, the idea that, right, death tries to swallow up Christ, who's undying, and so it has to like vomit him back up, and he swallows it instead and conquers it, So, and he did that by submitting to death, not by becoming a strong man and trying to rule the world through strength of arms.
Yeah. Well, like the passage in Matthew said, I mean, there's one who controls life and death, and it's none of us. And so you have to put your faith in the one who has the control over those things.
Right.
So, and another passage that we had here was Ephesians 6:10-12, which says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And I thought, the interesting thing about that is this saying that we are studying this week talks about scheming, and here the chief of all the schemers is the devil.
Yeah, and going back to that mockery idea, right? What's the famous saying? One of the most famous sayings about the devil is that the devil hates to be mocked, right? Yeah, like laughter.
So these people, who mock, right? What are they putting their trust in?
They're putting the schemers and those sides of the mockers are putting their trust in the power of their own strength and the finality of death, right?
Because they think they have something over on other people by threatening them with it.
The strongest thing, the final thing would be death, right? Like they don't have the hope that Job has that we've talked about, where he knows even though he's going to die and go down to the dust, that these eyes will see God.
Right.
That's his faith.
Yeah, if you put your trust in the finality of death, then you also put your greatest fear in something, the finality of death, right?
Right.
I mean,
that's the biggest power in the world. Yeah, so that's the thing you end up serving, which is not good.
Maybe that's why the beginning of wisdom is
the fear of the Lord.
Fear of the Lord, not death, right? And the God is life.
Yeah, and that's why we've talked about, like in our 10 Commandments study, looking at the whole 10 Commandments as fearing, trusting, and loving God as above all things, and that includes the fear, right? Like Pastor Wolfmueller, who we've had on, does a sort of thought experiment with this, where he's like, you're sitting there with God, and you have applicants coming in, and one of them's like a violent general or gang member or whatever, some guy, crazy man with a gun, and he's like, you should be afraid of me, and he's like, oh, I don't know, Jesus, should I be afraid of him? He goes, no. So they dismiss him, and disease comes in, and famine, and like any terrible thing you could think of, and he's like, no, you can't be afraid of any of that. And finally, there's no applicants left, and you're like, oh, okay, I only can be afraid of the person who has the authority over all those other scary things. That's what you're supposed to realize.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what's the long term? We talked about they only think short term, so there's a long term.
They'll win the physical battle potentially, even against the people of God. I mean, there's plenty of stories in the Bible where the Israelites lose battles, or the apostles or disciples are martyred. We could lose the physical battle, but the long term thing is the spiritual war, right? I mean, same thing Christ did, laying down his life. That's not ultimately what we're afraid of. We're more afraid of losing our, like Jesus says, to be afraid of the one who can destroy both body and soul. Yeah. So consider this story from Matthew 20, 17 through 19. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life. Which is a nice, comforting aside on the road trip.
I thought this was interesting, because Jesus knew he was going to be mocked, right? He knew it lay ahead of him on his journey to the cross and beyond. But see, he also knew what was beyond the mocking.
Yes, that's true.
And that can be traced back to his knowledge, not only just direct revelation that he had from God, but he also, as we've shown throughout our studies of the Old Testament, that Jesus was an expert of the prophets, right? We saw that especially in the minor prophets, but the book of Isaiah also talks about this. And so in Isaiah 57, 1 through 4, it says, the righteous perish, and no one takes it to heart. The devout are taken away, and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. Those who walk uprightly enter into peace. They find rest as they lie in death. But you, come here, you children of a sorceress, you offspring of adulterers and prostitutes. Who are you mocking? At whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars?
Yeah, harsh words. And so he's kind of saying, sure, the schemers can kill the righteous, right? But he kind of says, God allows that as a mercy, right? Because it's so terrible living in the same world as the schemers, right? Where he says, the devout are taken away, and no one understands that they're taken away to be spared from evil.
Yes.
Like, yeah, he lets you kill them because that's better than sticking around with you lot. So the message there is that God's people have peace in death, right? But the schemers and violent men don't even have peace in life. Yeah, we were talking about they end up on this path where they owe the mob boss, and then they're on the run from the law, and then they basically have no legal options, no peaceful options, and they end up trapped with that for the rest
Yeah.
of their lives.
Yeah, but for us, to live is Christ and to die is gain.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah. So we read the first chapter of Proverbs there earlier. It's actually quite in step with the first Psalm, which we've also studied before, but we'll read it again because it's very short. So this is all of Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. That's a pretty good summary of everything we've talked about up to this point, right? Their short-term thinking, even if it's well executed, only brings about short-term results. They've had their reward in full.
mm-hmm.
And if you can go back and if you want to and watch our study on Psalm 1 in our Old Testament series, and we talked about the poetry, the Hebrew poetry, where you see this kind of repetition at the beginning of what the righteous man is like, and it kind of lays out this pattern, and then it breaks it when it brings up the wicked. And it's like, and they're just like chaff that gets blown away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the New Testament, it even says the same thing about people who do good things for the wrong reasons. Like the person who prays in public and in showy ways, their recognition of their showy prayer is the only reward they get, because God's like, I'm not listening to that prayer.
Yeah. They've received their reward in full. That's what Jesus says about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so rather than plotting evil, what should we be doing instead?
So we looked at that in saying number 16, 7 episodes ago, and that was Proverbs 23:23 said, "Buy the truth and do not sell it. Wisdom, instruction, and insight as well." So we're supposed to be pursuing truth, right?
Well, and I would say that's what in verse 2 here of Psalm 1, the man whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on his law day and night. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a pretty effective way of getting instruction and truth and insight.
Yeah, that is. And so nonetheless, right, we're still tempted to scheme and seek dishonest gain, right? Every advantage we can get.
I mean, why are we tempted? I think ultimately we want a shortcut to peace and ease, especially in this life, and an end to struggle and to work, which if you've if you've read like the first 3 chapters of the Bible, you'll know there's kind of a curse that we have to work for our living. We had that and we threw it away. So it's a good thing to work hard. And like we showed, it probably doesn't actually work out for you if you try to find some shortcut around it. You end up down some other rabbit hole that you can't get out of, where you're working hard to stay one step ahead of the law or one step ahead of the other strong man who's trying to get you. So we've said that the overall theme of the sayings, right, is to think long-term instead of short-term. And so, of course, it's okay to make plans, right? But are they long-term plans for prospering spiritually in particular, or just short-term plans for something quick, a quick buck, taking advantage of somebody?
Scheming, as it said here. Scheming, toward evil. So,
and do you leave room in your plans for God, right? Because obviously we can try to make plans, but he knows what's going to happen.
Well, and the plans that you make for good or for evil end up setting your reputation in life, right? Like whether you're known as a liar, cheat, or a mocker, or whether you're known as an upright man, like the man in Psalm 1.
Yeah, and so even if like we were saying, you might succeed short term with a dishonest plan, right? Like we were saying that the strong could kill the righteous, but that's actually a mercy on God's part towards them, and they might win that physical battle or the short term battle, but lose the long term war. So even if you succeed, right, and now you're known as a liar, a cheat, a mocker, like you're trapped. You've laid out that trap for someone else, and now you're trapped because now that's your reputation. You can't walk into a company and apply for a job as an accountant from that point. Once you're known as the guy who steals from people, they're like, yeah, we'll let you handle our money.
Oh, you might be the subject of a parable of Jesus or something. A dishonest money
Yeah,
manager.
that does sound a little bit like that. Yeah. He kind of did that in the opposite order, though.
Yeah. So our wise words takeaway is do not scheme against others. Plan instead to rely on God's righteousness and peace.
Yeah, I think a really good practice is what you start and end the day with, which nowadays is for most people is like staring at a smartphone. But so what's the first thing on your mind in the morning? Is it seeking God or seeking your own gain, or pleasure or whatever it might be? And this is kind of the whole job of the church, right? To make disciples is to teach people to seek first the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And what does he promise if we do that?
I think I shared before on here that the thing that made me really drove that home for me was the temptations of Christ. And when he says, he quotes Deuteronomy and he says, man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That had always bothered me in the past until I realized he was saying, until you have a plan, like this is about planning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you need to feed yourself?
Yeah.
Like if you think of it as a computer and a computer needs a program to run, why would you power the computer if it had no program?
Yeah.
And if you are a thinking person with a brain, that you need a plan, you need a program to run. And Jesus is telling us when he quotes that, until I have a program to run, I don't need food. He tells Satan.
Yeah. Or we've talked a little bit about businesses and stuff today. Why would you, if somebody came to you and said, I've got a great business idea, I just need you to lend me some money, and then you'll have a share in it. Like, okay, what is it? Well, I'll figure that part out later. It's like, well, then you're not getting an investment, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to seek first the kingdom of God, right? And then what does Jesus say? All these things, which he's talking about, our material needs, will be added to you. So going back to, if that's why we're tempted to try to find some shortcut around honest work or hard work, we need to put him first and rely on his peace. Because even if we can't get peace in this life, right? Like it said in Isaiah there, the God might allow the righteous to perish because we're going to have peace long term.
Yeah, and if you want to join a group of people who are struggling to rely on Christ for everything, for their righteousness and peace, not looking for the easy way out, but for the long-term, dependence on God, that's what we call a church.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of people who are trying to do the right thing, banding together to support each other.
Another word for that might be the kingdom of God.
Yes. Yeah. So that's our message from Proverbs today. He's Caleb and I'm Timothy. And thank you for listening to Bible discussions on Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. Please consider subscribing to our channel to help support our efforts. All scripture quotations, unless otherwise indicated, are taken from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV, copyright by Biblica Inc., used by permission of Zondervan, all rights reserved. This program is copyright 2025 by Timothy Klingerman. God bless all of you.